So, over the past few weeks, I've been watching multiple speeches, but I definitely wanted to focus on five speeches that kind of caught my attention. They came from Hillary Clinton, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC in the United States, Gavin Newsom, who's the governor of California, Donald Trump, who is the president of the United States, and Marco Rubio, sorry. Um, and for the first time, I think ever, or the first time in me paying attention, but I definitely think historically this is the first. America stepped onto two different global stages, both at Davos and Munich, both huge conferences around finance and security. And America carried five different versions of who it is and also who it plans to be in the future. There was different parties speaking, different ideologies, different futures. Some spoke about reinforcing alliances, others spoke about renegotiating them. Some even warned about instability from inequality and climate. Others framed instability as a weakness born from dependence. But something felt consistent throughout all the speeches. Incremental change didn't sound like an option any longer. It wasn't policy tweaks that people were talking about. They were talking about sovereignty, strength, independence, complete recalibration. And as I watched these speeches, I sat there thinking, if leaders across the political spectrum are sounding some version of the same alarm, maybe from different sides, what does 2 to 4 years from now even mean? If you're new here, I use XRP as a lens to understand how money is moving in real time. There's no price predictions here, no hype, just the systems underneath all of that. So to start, I did not get into crypto to understand geopolitics. I got into crypto because I thought it was either a fast win or a semi fast win. It would be a cycle, a breakout, a moment. Instead, the finish line that I was chasing kept moving. And somewhere along the way, I stopped watching the price charts and I started watching speeches from global leaders. And that's when this shifted for me because by staying in this space long enough, I ended up watching world leaders rethink systems that I had always been told were permanent. And that is destabilizing and also exciting. Because lately, the structures that hold those systems together, in my opinion, feel less like concrete and more like tape. What made me pause from watching these speeches wasn't just what was said or the rhetoric, it was the structure. The same week most of those speeches were happening, Ripple, the parent company of XRP, announced it had received authorization in Luxembourg to operate as a regulated payments entity inside the European framework, or they received a digital banking license. This isn't an incremental move. This is actual structure being put in place. Around the same time, regulators in the United States began publicly coordinating on crypto taxonomy and jurisdiction, another huge win or move for the crypto industry. Also, within the past year, Europe has fully enforced its MiCA regulations on digital payments and other regulatory frameworks. Ripple already held licensing in Singapore under the Monetary Authority of Singapore. It maintained regulatory presence in Dubai's DIFC. It has acquired G Treasury, which we've done a video on, and you can go back and look at it. But G Treasury is a treasury infrastructure software used by corporations. And also ISO 20022 was quietly becoming, or is quietly becoming, the global messaging standard for financial institutions. All these moments are not retail events. They are plumbing events. Maybe the problem that I have to admit wasn't that nothing was happening. Perhaps the problem is that so much is happening, just not in the way that I expected cause and effect to work within this token adoption phase. Because underneath the headlines and exhaustion, infrastructure has been building. For decades, most international financial messages have moved through one primary network, which is called SWIFT. SWIFT is not owned by the US government. It's a Belgian cooperative governed by member banks. But most global trade still touches the US dollar. And the US dollar clearing ultimately runs through American banks. This creates a huge leverage for the US. In 2022, after Russia invaded Ukraine, major Russian banks were removed from the SWIFT system as part of coordinated Western sanctions. This wasn't theoretical, it was action. And it showed the world that access to global financial messaging and dollar settlement can be restricted as a geopolitical tool. And once something becomes operational like this, behavior has to shift. Not overnight, but it does have to shift, and in a permanent way. Countries that had never seriously considered redundancies started thinking about it. Not because they were anti-American, but because infrastructure risk feels different once you've seen it exercised. And once you question, can this happen to us as well? And here's where the timing gets very interesting. While this was happening, Ripple in the United States was being prosecuted by the SEC under the US government. The domestic environment was not welcoming for Ripple. It was actually hostile. So Ripple did what any company or person would do. When one door closes, they look for another door. And so Ripple went outward. It pursued clarity in Luxembourg, licensing in Singapore, presence in Dubai, not, in my opinion, as a geopolitical master plan, but simply as survival. But survival has a way of becoming structure, because over time, that outward movement created something quite different. A company, no longer anchored to one single regulatory building. A network of regulated entities operating under multiple sovereign frameworks. And that strange loop that I'm speaking of, that happened at the same period when America demonstrated the power of its financial leverage, was the same period when an American company was being pushed to build outside of it. No one coordinated that, but the incentives lined up. Pressure created demand. Pressure also eroded and changed the landscape. And then the floor shifted again. The SEC case was resolved in the United States. The domestic regulatory tone has softened, if not completely done a 180. America began talking about leading crypto rather than litigating it. So, now Ripple enters this next phase holding something very unusual. One, a global distributed regulatory architecture built during the hostile years, and a newly welcoming home environment at the same time. The demand that was created in 2022 doesn't disappear just because Washington's tone has changed. Once countries begin thinking about redundancy or even sovereignty, they don't stop. That's not conspiracy. That's how systems evolve after stress. It's even how humans evolve after stress. That distributed architecture was not built for headlines. It was built during uncertainty. But the world that exists today in 2026 is exactly the kind of world that architecture actually fits into. A world where governments are talking openly about sovereignty and payments. Allies are quietly diversifying risk. Dollar dominance is still intact, but no longer unquestioned. Regulators are clarifying rules instead of threatening enforcement. For years, Ripple's global build-out looked premature. Now it looks positioned. Not because adoption has arrived, but because the environment finally resembles the scenario that its structure was built to handle. That's the difference. For a long time, infrastructure and regulation were misaligned. Now they're moving in the same direction. And alignment changes timelines more than excitement ever could. And here's the tension that I can't ignore. The tone of the global leadership sounds urgent. Listening to the speeches, it sounds like things that must have solutions tomorrow, or if not yesterday. Regulatory architecture is accelerating around the world, not just in the States. Geopolitical messaging is accelerated. Almost every day, it seems like the gas pedal is going faster. And yet, crypto timelines still say 2027, 2028, 2030, which to me feels so mismatched. But here's the grounded part. Institutions are slow on purpose because trillions of dollars sit on top of them. You don't just rip up the plumbing of a global financial system overnight. You phase it out. You test it. You phase it in. You hire teams. You integrate systems that already exist into new systems. You build compliance structures. You grow relationships. Speed at that level can break things for many people. So adoption at that layer must be deliberate. It must be coordinated. What I'm feeling isn't just impatience, which I do feel impatience quite a bit around this space, but I'm also feeling awareness. When leaders across the spectrum speak like the world order is shifting, and you're simultaneously watching payment rails modernize, you realize you're not waiting for a pump anymore, because pumps don't come from announcements. They come when trust in new pipes exceeds comfort in the old ones. When the benefit of participating outweighs the friction of staying out. When institutions decide the new system is safer than the old one. I think we're watching that transition. And transitions don't move at retail speed. They move at sovereign speed. And sovereign speed is messy. It's slow. It's political, emotional, and it's exhausting. But underneath that noise, the rails are being laid. This isn't about predicting what XRP will do in the future. It's about understanding what levers and pulleys would need to move for XRP to do what it was built to do. Trust replacing caution. Coordination replacing fragmentation. Volume replacing speculation. And I want to remind you, I'm not here to argue with the loudest voice in the room. I actually don't even care about the loudest voice in the room. I'm here to translate what most people don't understand yet, and to build clarity where confusion keeps most people out. And you know, as I've been thinking about this whole swift changing of systems, the best analogy that kind of really got me to understand it is almost like if there was one postal system for the whole world that everyone sent their mail through. And if there was one part of this system that uses this postal service that decides, hey, this person cannot receive mail anymore, or they can't send mail anymore, this is what happened with the sanctions in Russia. And so I think what Ripple has been doing is actually building post offices around the world that have their own sovereign framework so that no one jurisdiction has the power to control what letters can be sent or received. There can still be jurisdiction, if possible, when many of the jurisdictions agree, but it's not unilateral control. It evens the playing field. I don't know, it's something that kind of helped me sit with all of this. But thank you for joining me. I don't even think there's an end to this. I don't think there can ever be an end to this exploration. Simply another deep dive. This is Layer 1. I'm James Harris. Thanks for joining me. And we'll have another episode ready in the next few days. And can't wait till see you later. Have a great weekend.